Drivers, start your engines!
Hit the pace car! What for? Because you hit every other damn thing out there, I want you to be perfect!
When I'm driving, I got a guy on the radio who talks to me. It's him, but he talks to me.
Well, I wanna be a race car driver, pretty girls eating from my hand, yeah. Wanna live a life of fun and danger, no sweating working for the man, alright.
Good evening, race fans. Welcome to the Hoobazoo Radio Network and welcome to the Drafting the Circus program. My name is Frank Santoroski. I'll be your host for the next hour as we talk about this past week in racing and preview next week. Joining me in the studio, Richard Youden and Luis Torres. What's up, fellas?
Hey, how's it going?
Going pretty good.
All right. So packed weekend. All three major series in action, as well as the little Tony Stewart SRX thing. But let's lead off with Formula One today. We'll kind of go through the race. Oh yeah, I know.
Me.
We'll go through the races they happen in. So we're Paul Ricard, and Paul Ricard, we always expect a snoozer. You know what I mean? A lot of times the most fun to think about is talk about with Paul Ricard is that goofy looking trophy of the gorilla painted up like a French flag, right?
It's almost like the Dover monster, isn't it? The monster from Dover.
Yeah, except the monster from Dover actually looks pretty cool.
Oh, come on. It looks pretty decent. The only thing that makes it awkward is no Pirelli tire because it's not the title sponsor of the event this year. I mean, in 21 compared to 19.
There you go. Yeah.
True. Okay, well, there's our trophy talk out of the way. You know, the giant gorilla. Paul Ricard turned out to be anything but a snooze fest because we had a lot of differing strategies, you know, when we saw what happens with the one stop versus the two stop. I mean, at the end of the day, it was Max Verstappen taking the win, third win in the row for the Red Bull team, fourth win overall for the Red Bull team, third win on the season for Max Verstappen, takes a nice little lead over Hamilton in the points. So, Richard, I'll just let you take it away because again, you know, we usually expect Paul Ricard to be, it was pretty interesting to watch.
Yeah, I mean, normally, as you say, it's a snooze fest, and that's either because the racing's boring or you become hypnotized by the sort of psychedelic runoff areas that they have around there. For
Spirograph.
The traction the grippy surface. But yeah, it's a bit like Barcelona, I mean, because it's basically a test track. That's its job. It used to be called that, I think, the high-speed test track for a while before it was rebranded. But, you know, it is a test track and it's not designed for racing. But they've managed to put together a half-decent circuit. And this, you know, they can always make it better, I'm sure. But, it was again, a gripping race, you know, based around strategy, which is always good to see and always exciting. You know, again, you had the issues of red flags in qualifying, you know, knocking a couple of the guys out there that you would have thought, you know, maybe would have gone through to Q3 and maybe even Q4. That's like Q2 and Q3 there. You know, Mick Schumacher actually spun coming out of turn 6 and hit the wall, which helped him because it meant he got to Q2 for the first time, but obviously it prevented some of the other guys from being able to go out instead of fast lap. Sonoda, again, unfortunately, had an incident like 2 corners into his first flying lap. So not only does that mean he started last, but it also had quite a detrimental impact on a lot of the other guys who'd already started flying laps on the tyres and already got the heat cycle in there. And as we saw throughout the race, tyre deg was a huge factor here. And, you know, the soft tyres, you were struggling to get a whole lap on them in many, many ways. Through qualifying, the top 10 all did Q2 on the medium tyre, so they would start the race on the medium rather than the soft. So getting into the race, you know, coming out of qualifying, apart from a couple of guys being out of place at the back, it was pretty much as you expected. 2 Red Bulls, 2 Mercedes on the front 2 rows. Verstappen on pole, Hamilton second, about two and a half tenths down. Verstappen and Hamilton both got good starts. You know, Verstappen leading, and then sort of he got a little bit loose. In turn 1, and ended up exiting the track in turn 2, and he managed to avoid having to go through the sort of runoff. And I thought he was very lucky to avoid a penalty there. There was a if you went to the right of these bollards coming out of turn one, then you had to go through a little like chicane of cones. And they deemed that he actually exited the track going into turn two rather than turn one. So it was all a little bit, yeah, I think he got a little bit lucky there. So the secret now, guys, is if you're going off in turn one, just slide your way through turn one and run out at turn two rather than go straight on at turn one, and you'll be fine.
I'll remember that the next time I'm entered in the French Grand Prix.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay,
just
good.
Just
good to know.
Just as a note, side note, hey, free advice is good advice. So it sort of settled down. So then anyway, Verstappen ended up, behind Hamilton through that little runoff, and it sort of settled down. And you say, oh, okay, here we go. And Verstappen stopped first, and then Hamilton stopped. I think it was a lap, maybe two. No, it was a lap later, wasn't it? And he had about a 3-second lead at this point, and it was about lap 15 or something, I think, 12, 15. And you're thinking, okay, well, Verstappen will get a little bit on the undercut because he's got fresh, hard tyres rather than old mediums. And he may halve that deficit. And the next thing Verstappen's taken the lead. It was incredible. It's like, where did this come from? And, for the next 10, 15 laps or so, Verstappen held position and kept on a bit. And he was saying, on the radio, these tyres aren't going to last. And watching the race, I think you've got to pit him. You've got, the undercut is so strong. They had, say, I think it was like 36 laps to go from when he first pitted. So 18 laps was half it. You want to undercut that slightly. So I said, stop after 16 laps on those tyres. And I think they stopped after 15 laps on those tyres. And, Hamilton knew that he couldn't react. If he'd stopped, he would have come out well behind and just been able to follow because they'd be on the same set tyres. So Hamilton's strategy was to stay up there and try and nurse the tyres to the end. Bottas was in the same position behind him, and they just couldn't do that. And Verstappen was reeling him in. Now, there was a point there that I thought Verstappen actually cooked his tyres and wasn't going to be able to do it. But no, he'd obviously saved a little bit of life in there and managed to get it done at the end. And with a couple of laps to go past Hamilton on the back straight, going to that little chicane there. But it was a really solid race, and I think both drivers drove fantastically. Hamilton to nurse those tyres and almost hold on to the win, and Verstappen to put in those really consistent, fast, almost Schumacher-esque when Schumacher was back in the day. And it was so good to watch, and it was two. We talked about it, haven't we? These are two guys at the top of their game. And we may never have seen, in Formula One anyway, two such talents, pushing each other as hard as they have in two equally matched cars. You Prost Senna maybe. Is this closer? I maybe it is because they're in different teams. So you have that extra added thing. Senna and Prost, McLaren could have turned up with a dog of a car and still be racing each other every week. So at least with this, you've got the teams pushing each other as well as the drivers. But it was fantastic. And
yeah, I mean, it's really refreshing to see, the battle at the top be between two teams. We've seen, Ferrari get close there, back. A
couple of races.
A few years ago when Vettel was winning a couple here and there. But largely it was, between Hamilton and whoever his teammate was at the time, whether it be Rosberg or Bottas.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really neat that we got two different teams in there. And when's the last time that a team other than Mercedes was leading in wins at this point in the season?
I mean, Ferrari, in 19 was it, before they had that engine, their wings were clipped on the engine regulation? Maybe. That was when it was last close. But you'd be having to go back to pre-hybrid era when 2013, when that was the last time Red Bull, won 3 in a row. But I think there's also some other standout performances. Again, McLaren are looking strong. They've overtaken Ferrari in the Constructors' Championship for third place now. Lando Norris again kept up his only driver to have scored points in every race. Drove great. And Daniel Ricciardo had another really strong race. He had a fantastic start. If you managed to get to watch his onboard start, he goes right around the outside at turn one, and it's fantastic start by Ricciardo.
McLaren they beat everybody except the Red Bulls and the Mercedes.
Yeah.
So they've cemented themselves right there as the best of the rest.
Sure.
And Ferrari has seemed to have fallen even farther backwards. And even I think AlphaTauri. I think
felt like a relatively off week for Ferrari, and McLaren has solidified probably the best in the rest, which used to be fourth onwards. Now it's basically a clear third onwards with Red Bull and Mercedes well ahead of everybody else right now.
But you look at this weekend as well was there's a lot of fallout from the Baku Azerbaijan race and the tire failures. So there was new pressure limits set by the FAA and a couple of other regulations that they put in place and Pirelli had put in place to hopefully prevent that from happening. So I think Ferrari probably were the biggest victims of those changes, which, well, maybe they were pushing the tires harder than anybody else, and they didn't have any issues, which was ironic, really. But, McLaren had a great race, and somebody who, we call him Mr. Saturday, well, turned out to be Mr. Sunday. George Russell finished 12th in the Williams and drove a fantastic race. Didn't have a great start. Tsunoda and Stroll, who were behind him, on the grid, got past him, and I think Latifi got past him for a while. And then when he went onto the hard tire, he just, just kept moving up through the field. And to be honest, he was lucky. He was unlucky. There wasn't a couple of retirements in the guys ahead of him, and he nicked a point there. But he drove a fantastic race, and that's where he needs to start stepping up. I think everybody knows his pace. On a Saturday, he can ring that car, to within an inch of its life and get fantastic qualifying laps out of it. Still hasn't been out qualified in the Williams, and he's 2.5 seasons in now. But some people have often questioned his performances on a weekend, and the starts haven't been great. And his start wasn't brilliant. I think he dropped a couple of places on Sunday, but he really strung that. I said that hard tire stint there at the end was fantastic and really, really good to see.
Certainly. Now, I want to get back to the Mercedes. Did you find their decision to make it a one-stopper curious?
Didn't have any choice, though.
Yeah, I get that because they, with the undercut one, but Bottas was very, very animated on the radio. He was, saying some words you probably shouldn't say on television. Certainly. But Hamilton, of course, seemed a bit calmer about the whole thing. Hamilton, again, who is a lot better at, when you say, Lewis, we need you to save them tires and stretch them out. He's, much more able to do that than perhaps. Yeah, it tends to be. Yeah, this is why he's won so many races and championships.
Yeah, he's not bad, is he?
Yeah, but but going into the race, you feel like they planned a one-stopper from the beginning and just there was no turning back after that?
Pretty much. I think the degradation was higher than they expected, and partly that there was heavy rain on Sunday morning. And if you got a chance to watch, I think it was the F3 race was actually running the wet on Sunday morning, which
that is correct.
Charles Leclerc's brother won for his first win, so that was good. But so the track was what they call green. A lot of the rubber had been washed off, so maybe the degradation was a little bit higher. And it was so close at the end there. If there had been a little bit more rubber on the track, then maybe Verstappen wouldn't have been able to catch Hamilton, and the tires would have lasted a little bit longer. And all these tire simulations and all these tire models that they produce, and the teams produce terabytes of data on every race weekend for this sort of stuff. It's incredible what they can generate. Sometimes it is just purely down to driver feedback. And it's, the teams have got to be able to react to it. Now, the interesting thing is, reading the Mercedes sort of, post-race comments on the strategy call and pitting Hamilton, like one lap after Verstappen. Now, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but I thought Hamilton had about a 3-second lead when Verstappen pitted. And, then Verstappen made up basically 3.5 seconds in that pit stop cycle. And Mercedes themselves have turned around and said, we can't find half a second of that difference. they're like, well, we know that he was quicker. Yeah, it was always the undercut was always going to be quicker, but we never thought it was going to be 3.5 seconds. We thought it was 2.5, 3. So we've lost half a second in our calculations, and they still can't work out where it is. Maybe I should have used that. Maybe I should have used that excuse when I was doing like my maths exams in college. Well, I just lost half a second somewhere. It's in there somewhere.
Somewhere, yeah.
They give me the marks for it. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that in the real world. So that's interesting. Again, it shows how clinical and how precise these guys are when it comes to strategy decisions and the like. And when one of the things doesn't quite go right, it can really screw you up. And listening to Bottas's comments there, and I think they were perfectly justified. Here's a guy who's arguably under pressure for his seat next year, and he said, "Look, guys, what more can I do? I'm giving you feedback, and the feedback would have potentially won us the race or put us in a stronger position, and you're ignoring it. And now I look crap because I finished 4th and not 2nd. So that shouldn't be on me." And to Mercedes' credit, his race engineer was saying, throughout the race, you're doing a great job, yeah, all this sort of stuff. Well, yeah. When you look at the points total at the end of the season, there's not a little asterisk next to it and say, well, he drove a great race in France to come 4th,
Yeah.
Prizes at the end of the day.
Pat on the back for you there. Yeah. But it seems to me that and this is not to take anything away from Red Bull or Max Verstappen, because those guys are they're banging on all cylinders right now. But it seems like when Mercedes loses, right, it seemed like they beat themselves. It's always a failed pit stop or failed strategy or Lewis's driver error with the brake thing. Again, like I said, not to take anything away from Verstappen, but he's certainly been the benefactor of a Mercedes team that seems to be making more mistakes this season than typically we're used to seeing.
Well, was that a mistake though? What happened on Sunday? Their hand was forced by Red Bull, and who won that race for Red Bull? It was Perez. Perez won that race for them. They couldn't react to it because of where Perez was on the track. You go back to Barcelona. Did Red Bull lose the race in Barcelona because Hamilton basically did what Verstappen did in Paul Ricard? No, I don't think that Mercedes lost the race. They just couldn't react to it. They didn't have the pace in the car and the tyre management availability to them to react. They just basically weren't quick enough. I really don't think Mercedes lost it. I think Red Bull won that race in the same way that Mercedes won Spain and Mercedes won Hungary a couple of years ago. I think you've got to give all the credit to Red Bull there. They had their hand there, and they played it perfectly. And we go back to it. We talked about it a couple of times. Perez is the guy that won that race. If Perez had been languishing down in like 6th or 7th, where Albon had been unfortunate the last few years, I don't think they would have been able to run that strategy. Or if they had, Red Bull or Mercedes would have been able to react with at least one of their cars and make it harder. So I think Red Bull won that race rather than Mercedes lost it.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah,
fair enough.
Comes across that way because it's one of those where Perez was trying to chase down Bottas, and it's one of those where we talked about this is the kind of thing that they paid him to do, get at the podiums to keep Mercedes out in the points table, and with Perez's tire management, and that was a clear-cut example where he finally broke through as the guy that you got to be careful for if you're going to win this Constructors' Championship.
Oh, for sure, yeah. And, Perez has been brought in to do one job and one job only, to win the Constructors' Championship, as you say. And, he had a rocky start. The first few races were a little bit, but, he has picked it up and he's really doing what he needs to do right now. So all credit to the guy. You can't knock him that he did exactly what was needed at Azerbaijan, picking up the pieces when, Verstappen and Hamilton had their issues. And top marks to him. Did everything that's been asked of him.
Yeah, well, good for him. So beyond that, we had Pierre Gasly had another really good run to 7th.
Yeah.
I just every time I just, for whatever reason, I really like Gasly. I think he's a good dude. The way he's been, promoted and demoted and back and forth. I think he's really kind of, found his footing. And I just hope that maybe in the next couple of years he gets out of that AlphaTauri into the, into one of the top seats. But we'll see there. But again, here's a guy who's a Grand Prix winner.
Yeah.
That's not in one of the top cars. So another good run for him.
No, it's very, very good, as you say. Yeah, very, very, very good. Great to see.
Yeah. So we're off to the Red Bull Ring.
Yeah.
For 2 consecutive races.
Indeed.
And so I guess you got to favor the Red Bulls there at the Red Bull Ring, don't you?
I think so. Yeah. I think you've also got to maybe look at, if you're looking at, Bottas is normally pretty handy around there as well. So maybe Hamilton could be on the back foot there. It'd be interesting to see what would happen if, Red Bull and, Bottas was ahead of Hamilton there during the race. Would they swap him? I don't know.
It's interesting. Yeah. Bottas needs to make some things happen this season. It's again, like you say, he's fighting for a seat. You got, George Russell, who's right there ready to take that seat. So, Bottas needs a good couple of weeks at the Red Bull Ring.
Mm-hmm. So, for sure. And he's won there in the past. He won there last year. He's been competitive. So I think there's every chance that he'll do the same thing again this week. And you put Red Bull as favourites. They're really starting to hit their get in their stride there. Mercedes are doing the usual sort of don't like it when somebody else beats them. They're questioning the Honda engine in the Red Bull there. They claim that, they saw a power jump when Red Bull upgraded their Honda upgraded their engine. They didn't upgrade because they're supposed to be homogenized, but, swap the engines out because you're only allowed so many per season. So you strategically swap engines in and out. So Paul Ricard was a brand new engine for Red Bull, and actually Azerbaijan was a new engine for the Mercedes car, and unfortunately Mercedes wasted that really. Mercedes were like, oh, well, Red Bull's got this new, they've gone to a new engine and it's a lot quicker and all this sort of stuff. If you actually look at the photographs, Red Bull just ran less wing. You can clearly see it. That you can actually probably just visually look at the photographs. You can see that the footprint of that rear wing on the Red Bull is far less than the Mercedes, which gave them the straight line speed because they can generate the downforce, which in turn generates, the grip through the tires in the medium and slow speed section. So they can run that skinny wing and, it worked for them perfectly.
Oh, absolutely perfectly. Yeah.
Ironically, Red Bull and wings.
Yeah, well, exactly. There you go.
Red Bull gives you wings. So but again, we are only 7 races into the season, and it's a long season yet, and we just can't discount the fact that Hamilton is prone to sometimes having a bit of a slower start or an early season kind of slump, but then he comes on strong at the end of the year. So
I don't think he has had a slump this year. I'm really
I'm not calling it a slump, but
he started with the win, which was something he hasn't done in years. But to your point,
all I'm saying is, that we've known Lewis to come on strong at the end of the season, and so I mean Red Bull is having a great season, but they can't let up at all. They can't get comfortable. Can't get comfortable at all. This is going to be one of the better title fights we've seen in a decade.
Yep. I think it's even going to be. I think it's going to be better than the Hamilton-Rosberg one because you don't have the nastiness involved. I think there's a huge amount of respect between Verstappen and Hamilton.
Oh, absolutely.
And despite all the public bitching that's going on, I think there's a huge amount of respect between Mercedes and Red Bull, and they're undoubtedly pushing themselves to new heights and the like. And you know what? I also think it's great for next season because you wonder if Mercedes and Red Bull are taking the eye off the ball for 2022 a little bit, and because they've got a championship to win this year. You'd be stupid not to try and claim this year's prize, but would that be detrimental to next year? I don't know.
And you got to wonder who that's going to benefit. McLaren perhaps. jump in next year with the new car and start winning some races.
Wouldn't surprise me at all. I think McLaren will be very strong next year.
Yeah, McLaren probably due for a win next year. I think them, and I know Haas have already, before the season even started, already focused on 22. This is kind of like what you call a rebuild year in other sports.
Yeah.
But I think, McLaren will be probably a preseason favorite. I wouldn't be surprised.
No, not at all. Not the way they're improving. Yeah. So I mean, again, how much? I mean, with that Mercedes engine, how much of the same goods they're going to have as the Mercedes factory car, remains to be seen. But certainly they're making hay with what they have.
This is interesting because this came up a few years ago. This concept of, what support does a factory team get compared to a customer team? And, I know that at times, some of the factory teams have maybe not given optimum settings to their customers, but the FIA are clamping down on that, and they're actually being a lot more thorough in checking that. I know that, a lot of the engine settings are checked, and a lot of the parameters that are available to these teams are monitored and checked very, very closely by the FIA to prevent this from happening. That's not to say there's still, Mercedes, for example, could turn around to McLaren and say, well, you need to have, more cooling ducts and all this sort of stuff. And of course, cooling ducts will increase your drag. So there's little things like that they can always sort of play around with. But on the whole, I think it's a pretty level playing field these days.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, if somebody else is winning with your Mercedes engine, it's still good marketing fodder for Mercedes.
Oh, of course.
So you don't want to, I guess, kind of disable those guys too much. Obviously you like to keep the factory team with all the glory, but you can't sabotage somebody who's also running your product.
But no, it'd be great to see, and it could be benefiting teams like Alpine as well. Ferrari as well. Who knows? But it could be a great battle next year.
Certainly, yeah.
Gosh, we haven't finished this one, and we're still talking about next year.
Yeah. And this was going to be a barn burner. So, all right. So, shall we go around and pick a winner for the Red Bull ring? Louise, would you like to pick Sergio Perez?
Actually, I'm going to go with. Let's go with Bottas. I think sense of urgency. He won one of the races a year ago. I think if he's going to really get that right next year and stop Russell, which is going to be insurmountable at this point, you prove yourself on race number 1 in Austria in front of Red Bull's home ground, Verstappen's Army's home ground too, because you're going to have a slew of people, I'd imagine, down there, depending on, obviously, social distancing. So, yeah, Bottas redeems himself like he usually does once a year.
Once a year. All right. So, Richard, who do you like?
Oh, let's go with Perez. I mean,
all right, then I'll go with Verstappen then. And so that being said, Hamilton probably win now. So
yeah, hey, make it great for the championship, wouldn't it?
Yeah, tighten it up. So, all right, so that's where we're off to next. IndyCar race this weekend at Road America. Interesting little race there. We saw it looked like Joseph Newgarden was gonna have a pretty easy win on his hands there, but gearbox failure in the closing stages of the race, and it was Alex Palou who was right there to pick up the pieces, grab the lead off of Newgarden, and take the points lead. Yeah. So Louise, you want to go over the IndyCar race a little bit?
Yeah, that late race caution for the second straight race in a row bit Newgarden, because if you remember at Belle Isle, it was Colin Herta was chasing down Newgarden, then the caution for Grosjean happened, who, by the way, Grosjean probably would have been, is probably my driver of the day of that race. He had a phenomenal showing. He really showed no remorse on his competitors and put on a phenomenal showing. Has to polish turn 5 a little bit, though, because he did win wide multiple times when dealing with the likes of Hunter Ray and the other Andretti cars throughout the race. But great top 5 for him. But going back to Newgarden, it's the second straight race in a row where somebody was chasing him. The question is, can the runner-up driver catch Newgarden? And the late race caution bunched everybody up. last time at Belle Isle, it was tire grip, especially in the rear. This one was just gear shifting. It's like Penske can't catch a break if the life depended on it. And Pagano had an abysmal ending. The strategy didn't work out for him. Finished behind a lot of cars that he should be beating, but that's just how strategy works. Sometimes you just don't get it. And a late caution, which was for Ed Jones for the second straight race. No, third straight race in a row, a Dale Coyne car brought out the final full course caution in the closing laps. Belle Isle were both for Grosjean, and this one was Ed Jones with the right rear suspension breaking a Canada corner, spun, stall, and his day was over, which is not what Jones needs for long-term implications, which I will not go into details about that, but he really needs a good run if he's going to keep that ride in general, because he just needs to, because Jones came back from an off year, essentially, given this opportunity, a car that's done good over the years with Bourdais, and even with Ferrucci that 1 year a little bit. Got to step it up a little bit. But Newgarden,
he's got to step it up for sure. I mean, Ed Jones is, I mean, he came in, I believe, with Dale Coyne his first season.
Yeah,
and
he
then,
started out good, then given that
Ganassi ride. Then he got the Ganassi ride, which, on paper should be a pretty darn good ride. And he just wasn't able to capitalize on that. And then he found himself unemployed for a season. Now he's got another shot, and he's just again he's got to get his head in the game if he wants to stay in this series.
Yeah, the race finishes has been relatively inconsistent as it can get, but overall I would say good showing. Pato had a long day, and that's why with Palou's victory he went from trailing Pato by 1 point to now 28. At a track that, in my eye, that's where he broke through when he drove for Team Go Dale Coyne a year ago, the first one, where he got that podium in the 55 car. And it didn't surprise me that Palou was going to be strong. I mean, he's in the car that won with Felix Rosenqvist a year ago, that 10 car. And
yeah, I mean, Road America, it tends to guys with a European upbringing.
Yeah,
they tend to catch on to that circuit pretty quickly because Road America is pretty much the closest thing we have in the States to a European style course there.
Yeah.
And so then
that's why Grosjean had fun with it.
Grosjean had fun with it. That's why you've seen some, in the early days, you had these, guys coming out of nowhere like Hector Rabake and
final IndyCar racing. He won it.
Yeah. And, Jacques Villeneuve, Uncle Jacques had won a race there back in the 80s. And, other guys have just kind of taken really well to that. Emerson Fittipaldi's first road course win was on Road America. And you had a number of guys who won their first race at Road America. Franchitti's first win was at Road America.
Didn't tell Fabi too good. I know he is. The Porsche win was in Mid-Ohio, correct?
That was in Mid-Ohio, yeah. He didn't, I don't think, I'm trying to think of, I had listed them just the other day, and I realized everybody, until Rosenqvist, everyone that won their first race there had a name that ended in a vowel. Yeah, Rabake, Villeneuve, both Jacques Villeneuve's won their first race. They're Franchitti. But those guys with the European experience, and even to Palou's point, even some of the tracks he ran in Superfrom in Japan are very similar to those European courses. So for him to kind of take to that track very well is not surprising.
Yeah, speaking of European, Kevin Magnussen, when he stayed out to do some strategy work, he actually nailed that restart. He held his own quite well, but other than that, it was definitely a learning curve. You can tell it was one of those circumstantial moments where he got thrust into it right away without much preparation, which obviously what happened Rosenqvist was nobody expected it to happen. I think he did all right. If anything else, he had a strong restart. Just the mechanical gremlins kind of bit him that knocked him out of the race, which was one of three retirees. And
yeah, but you got to give the guy credit. His first time sitting in an IndyCar is the first, practice session of that weekend. No test time, other than a seat fitting. They didn't even let him drive it in the driveway a little bit.
Yeah, and Askew, Askew is another one who took over for Rinus VeeKay. He did pretty good. Another one that did a late race strategy that didn't quite work out, but he still got a top finish just outside the top 10. Max Chilton wound up 10th. He actually made that thing work long enough to where he built a relatively sizable gap to where he didn't lose that many spots. So at the end of the day, for a team like Carlin and Max Hilton, a top 10, all things considered, positive. Big day for them.
Yeah. But let's talk about the guy who that a lot of folks felt would be maybe a laughingstock and a danger. And then that's Cody Ware. The guy actually had a pretty respectable weekend overall.
Aside from spinning it in practice, which
that's
Yeah, obviously you're going to get that. Magnussen had his moments too, where he struggled to even be on par with the 52. And even Jimmy Johnson. Johnson had a strong final practice. It was in the top 10 for a couple minutes, ended up top 15. Spun it in the race, didn't have a good day, but it looked like it was probably his best week he's had so far, but obviously the results won't show it. But back to Ware. Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, a track like Road America, 4 miles, you really can't cause any harm or fault a lap. You have to have some sort of problem to fall at. But at the end, the fact that he was able to beat Connor Daly and Simon Pagenaud at the end and get a top 20 it's the most you can do. Really.
Yeah, I was going to say he wasn't as terrible as we all thought. No,
it did help to have track emphasis and all that track experience before, because it was one of the few that he tested, to my knowledge. So he held his own quite well. I'm still skeptical when he makes that oval start, whenever that'll be, though.
Yeah, well, so I don't know what else he has on the books for this year, but if he does, that'll be interesting. But didn't he run Road American Xfinity, or no?
He must have at some point.
I'm going to say Xfinity's been going to Road America for a number of years now, so it wouldn't surprise me if it wasn't his first time seeing this race course. But again, it's a solid day for the guy. I mean, you couldn't, we didn't expect him to, hit the top 10 or stand on the podium, but he didn't, he didn't wreck everybody else, So
I wasn't concerned about wreck. It's more or less how much he'll play as far as the outcome of a racing battle.
Right. Yeah.
That's more than anything else. And also the competition. With road courses, I'm not too terribly concerned. It's more or less when it comes to the ovals, because it's going to happen eventually to how they feel.
Right. Absolutely. So another guy that finally had a good day, Will Power, on the podium. It's another guy who's, kind of had a tough, anybody in a Penske's had somewhat of a tough season.
Yeah, Scott. Yes, even Scott has had kind of regressed a bit as well. So yeah,
I mean, Dixon is still there. He's not had any horrible finishes. He's still right there collecting points every week. If it weren't for the double points at Indianapolis, where Scott finished a lot farther back than you would expect him, he'd be right in the thick of that battle.
17th.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, if the Stephen Wilson caution really didn't help him when it came out. So
yeah, but you got to watch out for Scott. But to Palou's credit, we were talking about this the other day. The 10 hasn't outperformed the 9 since the Dario Franchitti days.
Yeah, most wins from somebody not named Dixon in a decade with Franchitti.
Yeah, which kind of it throws out the whole. There's a lot of folks who think that team is, or since Franchitti left, the team is built around Dixon, and every component of that team is designed to help Dixon win championships. But this particular season is kind of showing that maybe that's not entirely 100% the case. Because Palou is now got a pretty decent lead, so they'd be foolish not to. Give all their best resources, to Palou to keep him out front. Yeah. Okay, Richard, what do you want to say over there?
A couple of, I think that Dixon's a wily old fox. He's not going to let Palou beat him without a fight. I mean, if you look at it outside of Indy, Dixon's finished in top 10 every race this year. I think he's the only driver he's got the highest sort of top 10 hit ratio. Palou's finished out the top 10 twice. And, Dixon, he's not having a great season, but he's picking up points, 4th, 5th, 3rd, 7th. He's just, checking them off point by point. And he's only, 50 points behind or something. I mean, that can be made up pretty quickly with a couple of good weekends.
That's one race win, yeah.
Yeah, if he finishes ahead of, what's the 6, 7 races left? If he finishes ahead of Pillow out of 5 of the 7, which is very doable, you'd imagine he would overtake that points deficit. But the one thing that I wanted to mention, and I think we've talked about this on the show before, but it's becoming more and more of a recurring thing, is the Team Penske's performance. Definitely, not only has the actual results dropped off, but these mistakes and errors that you're seeing are creeping in. The last 2 weekends, a prime example. Penske could have and should have won all 3 races the last 2 race weekends, and they're sitting there with the best result of second, and it's not great. And I wanted to get your guys' sort of input. Do you think this ties in, and there's any correlation between Roger buying the series and the drop off in performance here?
Well, I mean, the thing Roger has done when he bought the series, what he said he was going to do was to make himself totally hands off from the race team itself. So, while he's still there at the tracks and whatnot, he's not really as hands on in the day-to-day operations.
Yeah.
And so now it's apparent that, so maybe even though he was the older guy, maybe his input was pretty darn important, and obviously Cindric is a very sharp guy. Cindric knows what he's doing, but you've got one less, with Roger out of the equation, you've got one less really sharp guy. Not that the other guys aren't sharp, but Roger's been in this business since, before you guys were born.
Yeah.
So I think there is something to that, and the team just has to kind of learn to work without Roger's direct supervision. And I feel that they'll get there. They're still a very professional organization. They're right on the cusp of winning races. They just having these silly mistakes, as you say,
or or ill-timed cautions as well.
But you've got to be able to react to it, though, haven't you? It's all part of racing.
Yeah.
You can say that circumstance cost you, but does it really? Especially the Will Power issue at Detroit and the Joseph Newgarden issue at Road America this last week. That issue for Newgarden appeared early in the race. He was talking about it on the radio. He said he went to shift to third and he just got a box of neutrals, and eventually it jumped back into gear. And then obviously under the restart, maybe everything's cooled down a little bit. The oil pressures have dropped. Just come back and bites him again.
Yeah, they were concerned about the yellows. Both radio and telecast were emphasizing a bit that how these cautions could have not come at a worse time, or they were concerned about it because they were caution after caution. With Road America, you don't really see it that often well. So this,
I don't think their concern came necessarily on the face of it from a concern about reliability, because you don't really know what's going on there. Obviously, your concern comes from a point of, okay, well, this is resetting the field, and that's not. Yeah, it's like not great. But yeah, I really think that I don't think something's wrong at Penske. Goodness me, Penske are such an organization. There's nothing ever wrong per se, but even in the Cup Series, they haven't been phenomenal. I don't know how many races they won between them, but they're certainly not on the Hendrick level. And
they've only won one apiece, I think.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yes. I think they got three. Each of their guys have won one apiece,
which is okay. But I'm sure Roger wants to have won far more than that come mid-season,
especially from Brad. If with all that whole rumbling thing right now that's going on,
exactly. So there's something's a little bit amiss there, and. You wonder. It's like any sports team, isn't it, or organization? When the legendary coach steps down, or the key player, whatever, walks away, then there is always going to be a time of readjustment and resettling, and everybody finding their feet. But you hate to see guys like Pagenaud and Will Power especially struggling, because they're towards the latter end of their career. I think it's pretty safe to say. And, you want to see them fighting up front. You don't want to see Will Power sort of, what is he, like 10th or 11th in the standings? He's sort of scrapping around for points here and there and seeing whatever he can get. I mean, yeah, he's had a couple of podiums, but it's nothing. Will Power wants 2 podiums from 2 races, not 2.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's not the Will Power
races.
used to season. Will Power, used to be good for 4 or 5 race wins a season.
Exactly, without
guaranteed.
even thinking about it. Yeah,
even qualifying, he's not been so much of a threat at all this year. He hasn't won a pole this year.
No,
he's been quiet on qualifying as well as overall. The speed has not been there.
So if what is it, 9 races? I'm just sorry, I don't know this off the top of my head. I am checking this on Wikipedia, but of the 9 races this season, he's only led laps in 3 of them.
Qualifying has been just Newgarden with those.
Yeah, I mean,
and McLaughlin,
really.
McLaughlin has not been setting the world on fire at all.
Since the 500.
A lot of people had really high hopes for this guy, and he's again,
he's okay.
He's a rookie, yeah, but he's in a Penske car. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But if Grosjean had done Texas and Indy, Grosjean would have been well ahead of McLaughlin in the championship. I think he's only 50 points behind him, and he's missed 3 races, and one of those was double points.
Yeah,
so
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and he'll run Gateway at the moment. It hasn't been official, but the speculation is going to run Gateway. Yeah.
So, I mean, I think if they continue this trend, Grosjean had a couple of bad races in Detroit, but outside of that, he's been stellar. And I could quite easily see Grosjean pipping McLaughlin for the Rookie of the Year. And everybody was saying, oh, McLaughlin's got this sewn up because he's the only guy doing a full season.
I'll tell you this, Richard.
It's going to look pretty crap for him if he doesn't.
I'll tell you this, Richard. Would you give him a good shot at the finale in Long Beach as wrapping up the year as a winner? Or do you think he's going to win beforehand?
I think Grosjean would. I think he'll get another podium before the end of the season for definite. And I think there's every chance that he will win another race. He will win a race this year.
I mean,
Mid-Ohio. We got Indy.
You got Mid-Ohio, Indy road course again. You've got Portland coming up, which are all tracks that'll favor him.
Where did he qualify on last weekend?
7th.
It was okay, but he was pretty. Pardon the expression, he was pretty ballsy. He's not. I think it's great to see that. And you don't necessarily see it so much in Formula One, and you don't have an opportunity for the drivers to show it. But he wasn't. He's not afraid to mix it with the best of the guys out there. He's going shoulder to shoulder with IndyCar veterans out there and commanding respect, not just saying, "Oh, I'm coming through." It's like if people are sitting up right now and taking note of him, and I think that he's doing a great job. What's his contract? Is it a year or 2 years?
I don't know.
I don't think it's specified.
But I wouldn't surprise me if he just has a really strong end to the season. Would Andretti turn around and think, if you drive the ovals, you want to come and race for it? Not that Andretti's any particularly better than where he's sat at the moment, but if he makes that commitment to do the ovals next year, which I know he's rumbling about possibly doing it, could he? I think he could be, a dark horse for potentially really being strong next year, because the guy knows what he's doing.
Oh yeah, no doubt he knows what he's doing. Yeah, but you put him in a car that's a few levels up from a coin car, and this is not to say a coin car is bad, because coin cars haven't known to win races.
Yeah, they brought guys that deliver. Look at the right guy.
Yeah, but
he's certainly shooting above his weight, I think, at the moment in some of his performances. Look at Indy, look at Road America, and even the first couple of the races of the season, he was new to the sport and beating experienced veterans of the series there in the first few races.
Yeah, he's really done well. I mean, and then when you contrast it to some of the guys that we expected to do well this year, like a Rossi, who's been nowhere all year. James Hinchcliffe coming back has not really made any way to speak of.
That's been a struggle.
Yeah, that's
And people say about the 20, it's the 26 or 26, but keep in mind this is the 29 is theoretically the old 88. As when you look at Herta, it took him. This is only a second podium of the season, quietly finishing second out of all of this. I think what we've seen from Herta is that, and I don't think it's the performance issue. Sometimes maybe the driver or the equipment that they have, or we talked about it even a bit. Do they have too many cars where they focus on one or two, and then the other was flounder?
But Herta is another good example. I mean, he's won a race and he came second at last weekend, but outside of that, he's been incredibly inconsistent.
He's been
for
the last couple of years. He's been he's either winning or he's also ran. Yeah,
everybody raves about, and there's no doubt this guy is quick. There's no doubt the kid has talent, and he's still 19. He's 20 at 2021 or something like that, isn't he? He's still very young in his career, but he's 21. But you look at Rinus VeeKay is a year younger than him, has missed a race, and is still ahead of him in the championship.
Right, and then of course, Award and Palou are two young guys too. Those guys they're both very young, and those guys are pretty much the top two drivers in the series this year.
Yeah, so you got to look at VeeKay's in, and he's VeeKay's in a car that is supposedly an not underfunded, but not a top three car. So I think there's pressure on guys like Colton Herta, and he's got to start. Everybody. And I'm not saying this in a negative. I'm not saying everybody can win a race, but a lot of guys go out and can win the odd race here and there. But championships, Scott Dixon has won the same number of races as Colton Herta, but he's nearly 60 points ahead of him in the championship by consistently knocking off those top fives and top tens. That's what wins you championships, not winning one. I mean, you look at I've got it up here. Colton Herta's first three results: 22nd, first, 22nd. Well, that's not going to win you a championship, is it?
No, not at all.
And he's supposed to be like driving Formula One in a couple of years. No. Gotta get that consistency.
Polish it. And that's been the Achilles of his whole career so far.
But no, he's only 21. He's very, very young, and a lot of guys haven't even stepped up to the series by that age. But how many races has he run? This is his third full season, is it?
Yep.
Maybe fourth. So, I'm not saying he's a veteran. He's not a Scott Dixon or a Will Power, but if everybody's raving about them as much as they are, he's got to improve this consistency and, I'm not saying he's got to win every race, but Turner do what Scott Dixon does. Turn a 15th place finish into a 10th place finish, and turn a 10th place car into a 5th place finish. Bring home the results when the car isn't fast.
Yeah,
that's exactly what it needs to do. Yeah,
for sure. Because you can have one or two non-top 10 finishes, but the rest you probably got to be in the top 10 to be in the hunt. Period.
Yeah.
And the one thing, I mean, this day and age, with the reliability of the cars, the amount of cars that finish each race, you can't afford those finishes towards the back. It used to be, back in the day, you could, in the 70s, if you won 4 races and had 5 DNFs, you'd be the Formula One champion. Why? Because there were so many DNFs. Now you've got, more often than not, you've got less than 2-3 DNFs in a race, because the cars are a lot more bulletproof. They're less prone to mechanical failure unless you have a Joseph Newgarden gearbox.
or a willpower
ECU. Yeah. So anyway, we're off to Mid-Ohio next, but we've got a couple of weeks off in between.
4th of July.
4th of July weekend we'll be at Mid-Ohio. So we'll talk about that in the coming weeks. Do we know anything
about VeeKay and
not yet, Rosenqvist?
Rosenqvist, yeah. Do we know anything about their participation?
I think that they're both slated to be back. Well, I think
Rosenquist has probably got a better
is
chance.
Felix is slated to be back. I'm not sure what the timetable is for VK. I hadn't, he had surgery.
That's Montoya. He knows.
Yeah.
We'll
he knows
see.
recovery period for this.
But again, it could be another opportunity for Oliver Askew, who is a guy who, lost his seat with McLaren, and he needs to, every time he's asked to sub, he needs to give everything he can to show that he belongs in the series. Because at the end of the day, the guy's got some good talent, but if he's got no place to showcase it, so if he gets another call up, he really needs to make the most of that. Well, let's talk about the Cup cars were in Nashville, the Nashville Super Speedway out in Lebanon. This the first Cup race there, I believe. They had held truck races and Xfinity races there in the past. Before that track was closed for a time, but now it's back up and running, and look like they got a good crowd on hand. They they were able to sell to the full capacity.
Yeah, strong crowd, but it was basically Kentucky to Electric Boogaloo, except much better because I think it looked like nearly everybody were there by the drop of the green flag. I think they delayed it a bit to assure it. So they had traffic issues all throughout the week. Even drivers and personnel had a hard time getting there. They were stuck in traffic as well.
Interesting. I hadn't heard all that, but it makes sense. I mean, I've been out to that track. I used to go there when the IndyCars raced there, but of course they didn't have they added additional grandstands for this one. I want to say that place only has about 30,000 permanent seats. So they added those temporary grandstands in the turns there to sell more seats. And I think they said they sold 40 to 45,000. So it's a bigger crowd than I've ever kind of had to deal with before. And the infrastructure isn't there. You're not right in Nashville proper. It's in Lebanon, which is a little farther out in the country.
Yeah, compared to in August, where it's going to be right at the streets of Nashville for IndyCar. But yeah, it was a good sight to see them back in Nashville. And of course, no surprise of our race winner.
Yep, 3 in a row, 3 point span races in a row, right? 4 overall because he won the All-Star.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
He's finished in the top 2 the last 6 straight races.
Yeah, so this guy is really putting his stamp on this season to the dismay of everybody else.
It's really making my bold prediction look improbable by the day. I still remember I said he'll be out on the first round.
Yeah,
but it doesn't look like it right now.
But yeah, he's hard to beat week in and week out. And it looked like one of the bigger issues on this particular track. I saw a lot of guys were having issues with the brakes.
Yep.
Which
Ryan Blaney had problems from the very beginning. It pretty much went from bad to worse. I think was it Chris Buescher, who's trying to get into the playoffs, had tremendous problems to the point that Justin Haley was having a phenomenal run in that Aspire car. He's going to be running full-time Cup next year with Colleague Racing. We could discuss more about Charters next time about it in greater detail. But top break for those 3 guys that I mentioned, because they were doing Blaney. We talk about Penske. They haven't had much luck. They've only won 1 apiece with Logano, Logano, Keselowski, and Blaney.
Hamlin's still winless on the season.
And his regular season points lead has dwindled. Yeah, his regular season points lead is now down to 10 compared to 100 or so before Kyle Larson was racking up all those wins.
Yeah. So, Denny can certainly use a win just to put a smile on his face if nothing else.
Yeah, fortunately, guess what? Doubleheader in Pocono. Going to come at a perfect time for Denny if he wants to get their regular season title, but also assure himself the win at some point, which I think can be done, but I feel like it's going to be Truex that may be the strongest core of the Gibbs trio. Quartet, excuse me.
Right. Now we're doing back-to-back races on Saturday, Sunday in Pocono, correct?
That is correct.
And one's what is it? One's at 300, one's at 350, one's at 400, or are they both 400s? I can't remember. They had some weird with the format.
I think it's not 400.
They're both. For some reason, I was thinking one race was shorter than the other. Maybe I made that up. I don't know.
But yeah, it's the only doubleheader of the year for Pocono, and then it'll be curious to see if Larson can continue it. I don't think so. I think we're going to see different winners this time.
There's a lot of guys out there that could use a win. You know, the defending series champion, Chase Elliott,
got disqualified.
Yeah, I know. Still winless on the year. If you have to ask Chase.
No. He won Coda. Elliott won Coda, so he has to win. But he has to.
Yes, he did. Yeah, he did. You're right.
Yeah, he was the last guy not named Kyle Larson to win. As a matter of fact, I think Hendrick is 5 in a row.
Like 6 in a row or something. 5 in a row, yeah.
Including the All-Star race would be 6 in a row. They won 5 in a row. You go back to Darlington for 6 in a row with Bowman. So it's been over a month. It's been over a month. So you safe to say William Byron is due for a win, and I have him actually winning the Saturday race and Truex on Sunday.
Yeah, but you know who really needs a win? Kevin Harvick. I mean,
that's another one.
The Stewart Haas team has hardly been heard from this year.
They finally got a pair of top fives with pole sitter Eric Almirola getting his first top 5 all year. That was his best race he's had since that win in the duels. Yeah. Harvick got a top 5 for the first time in quite a while. He's moved up a couple spots in the top 10 regular season standings, but there's a lot of guys that needed that strong run. Stenhouse got a top 10. That will certainly help his chances as far as creeping into the playoffs. But you still have a lot of races to go, a lot of tracks to go to where we have 11 different winners still. We can still see more unless Larson wins out, which if he wins out somehow, regular season that is. We're talking about Gordon numbers or even higher than Gordon numbers.
I was going to say, that's a tall order to win out. I mean, he's a nice little roll now, but there's a lot of races left in the regular season, including a lot of really interesting races too. You know, when we get to Indianapolis, we're going to run the road course rather than the oval. You know, so anyway, so we are just about out of time. So you like what did you say?
Byron and Truex.
Byron and Truex. Okay, so and Richard, who do you like for Pocono?
Right. You can't look past Larson for one of them, and Kyle Busch.
All right, and I'm going to say that Denny Hamlin gets one in the bag. Pocono is one of his favorite tracks. He's won there a number of times, and then I'm going to say that after Hamlin wins the first race, Kyle Larson says, "No, it's my job to win races," and he wins the second one. So. That being said, we are out of time, so I want to thank you, Richard, and I want to thank you, Louise. I want to thank the Hoobazoo Radio Network. I want to thank iHeartRadio, Spreaker, Google Podcasts, and YouTube. And I want to thank you folks who listen to us. Until next week, good night.
WHOOBAZOO, that's Hoobazoo.com.
Enter website.